think trainers should take steroids and performance-enhancing drugs?
I do think you would probably make more money because you would put on the facade that you are in better shape. And I do think that in the social media world, it really is about like being the part and playing the part and all of that.
You mentioned obviously you've been a professional athlete, you now have a hugely successful business. Do you think you've changed as a person as you've gained more success in your business?
A little bit. I do feel like, and this is probably similar to you as well, like if I make X amount, I think I'll be pretty happy. And then you get there and you're like, ooh.
95% of the world are sheep and the 5% of the wolves. And like if you look at the wealthy people in the world versus the non-wealthy, that's really the way it works. And I think you have to identify what side of the fence you want to sit on and where you want to be in the pecking order. And I think that's also your ability, as you said, to lead, but also to help people. And then also probably thirdly, to be decisive and do the things that other people aren't willing to do. So today we've got a ripper of a podcast. We've got my good friend Ryan Fischer, who I've dragged over all the way from Newport Beach, California, who just crushed our live event this weekend. Ryan has one of the biggest fitness apps in the world with over 40,000 clients. He was formerly one of the best CrossFit athletes in the world before getting kicked out, threatening to kill someone. And today's going to be a ripper of a podcast. So thank you for your time, Ryan.
Thanks, man. I'm actually really excited to be here. Dubai is, it's such a great place. I feel like a lot of people give it a bad name, and I'm like, I don't see any of that. I just see awesomeness the whole time.
Okay, so let's start with that. Why do you think some people in the West, let's say, give Dubai a bad name? Like, what things have you heard?
It's not about like hearing it. It's about like you see all the flashy cars, you see all the things, and you're just like, oh, I bet everyone in there is like materialistic and all of that. It's probably like Miami times like 10, and then it's just not. I feel like there's a really good mix of people who want to grind really hard, and just like regular people who are just here having a good time, escaping the UK. I've been to the UK. I've had a lot of great times in London. I've met a lot of amazing people from London, including yourself. Like, I shouldn't say like you're not maybe from London, but from the UK. But for some reason, it is the only country I have ever met someone who has, they've never said, I love the UK. Every single time they're like, oh, the fuck is shit. Like, that's why I just come here. So like people always just leave the UK and like no one's ever proud of it. It's kind of funny.
I think that's fair. I think it's actually a sad state of affairs. I would say national pride is something British people don't have anymore. Like, which ironically, 150 years ago, we're the biggest empire in the world. Now the country is, quite frankly, a bit of a joke, is a bit of a sad state of affairs. But that's a whole nother matter. One of the first questions I wanted to get into, and we actually just filmed a YouTube video on this, and obviously a big demographic of our audience are trainers. Do you think trainers should take steroids and performance-enhancing drugs?
Tough. I do think you would probably make more money because you would put on the facade that you are in better shape. And I do think that in the social media world, it really is about like being the part and playing the part and all of that. However, having said that, I have never taken steroids and I feel like I've done just fine. However, I will say that I've been a professional athlete for my entire life. So like I'm putting in significantly more hours and effort and stuff into the gym. And a lot of people always ask me like, how do you stay motivated all the time? I'm like, well, if your bank account was directly correlated to how you looked, I bet you wouldn't have that much, issues like staying motivated. So for me, I'm always like, even earlier you were like, do you want to have a cookie or whatever? And I was like, no, I don't have cookies because like in my head, I'm like, obviously I could have the cookie, but it's like, I might make less money if I get addicted to having fucking cookies. So I'm just like, no cookies. You know what I mean? Like it is what it is. But I do think if I was somebody who wanted to start being in the industry, I mean, it's only going to help you to be in better shape. The one thing though that bothers me is I do think if you do it, just say that you do it. You know what I mean? Like, or don't say anything, but don't say that you don't do it, because I don't like that. Because nobody cares anymore, in my opinion. I
agree, and I think one of the good things now is it's very open and transparent.
It's very open.
Maybe when I first came into the industry, it was a very taboo thing, whereas you could probably think of the first person I am straight away with.
Yeah.
In terms of like, there's a lot of big names in the industry who proclaim they're natural, where I'm like, dude, I know you take like tanning jabs and melanotan and shit. So like the reality is if you're taking that, then you're going to be taking other substances alongside that.
100%. And I think like when you really get into this and you understand there's a lot of people who do those things way more than you can imagine. It's so many people. There's also a lot of people who do that stuff and still don't look very good. So to say that like that's the thing that like unlocked this physique for you is not necessarily accurate. So I still think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done regardless. I just don't like when people claim lifetime natural. I almost feel like every time someone who claims lifetime natural, it's like blatantly that they've used drugs before, in my opinion. Because if you're a lifetime natural, you just don't say shit. You just live. Like I don't take anything, and I have never said I'm lifetime natural. I just do my thing.
If I haven't taken anything today, my 24 hours natural. With that, how prevalent do you think performance-enhancing drugs are in sports, maybe even things like CrossFit?
Man, I've been in sports a really long time. I used to live in the Olympic Training Center, and that was the only thing that we talked about was like doing drugs, because like
really,
there's nothing else to do. You're with a bunch of dudes, you're in the cafeteria, you train all day, and at the end of the day, I think like, you know, one of the most common things I talked about with my buddies back then was like, what could we take and not get in trouble? You know what I mean? So we were definitely against like taking really gnarly stuff, but we're like, what could we take and still not get in trouble? So that was things like HGH, like insulin, like some of these things that really couldn't be tested in urine, but like in a bloodstream kind of thing, or bloodstream, in a blood test, but like not in like a urine stream. So those are things that we talked about quite a bit. And having not taken anabolics, I have taken HGH back in the day. I have taken insulin back in the day. That was things that I definitely messed around with. That immediately stopped when I took too much insulin one day and thought I was going to fucking die. And I was driving home, and I'll never forget, like, I just ran every red light. I was going fucking crazy. I went to like the nearest gas station and just started guzzling Gatorades and eating Snickers bars. And the guy's like, you have to pay for that. I was like, I'm just going to fucking die right now. I got to get this done. And I was like, all right, I'm never doing this ever again.
Was that fast-acting insulin and you took too much?
Yes, it's Humalog.
How did you just take shitloads accidentally?
I was trying to take like 5 post-workout. You know what happened? Do you know that guy, Victor Conti?
Yeah.
So he was the guy who...
He was the big Olympics drug guy, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
and he's the one he's responsible for all these people failing their tests. But when I was younger, I remember the letter that he had written to like Dwayne Chambers or whatever that wound up becoming public. Yeah. In that letter, it was like, take this. And this is like when I was in the Olympics, and I was like, oh, this is literally a blueprint to become a fucking savage. And I was young enough where it was like, I'm just going to do it. And the younger you are, the less you care about like the repercussions of doing anything. And I remember when I was in college, I went to college for exercise physiology, nutrition, like all that stuff, super nerd. And I remember specifically in one of my classes, I can't remember which one it was, but they asked a bunch of kids in college, if you could win everything for the next 5 or 10 years, I couldn't remember if it was 5 or 10 years, if you could win everything, be the most famous person on the planet, just crush everyone in every single thing, but you would die at the end of that, would you still do the drug? And it was like 80% of people said yes. And it's crazy to look back on that now because I feel like there's no chance I would say yes to that. But back then, when I was talking about all these things, I would have done it. It's mind-blowing to me that I would do that. And to be fair, I still, to this day, I genuinely feel like the sport of bodybuilding and like the things that are going on with like CBum and like a lot of these like really, really big athletes being glorified for taking huge amounts of drugs. Granted, they are amazing at their craft. Like, I will not say you're not an athlete. I will not say you are not incredibly impressive. But these people are shortening their lifespan and we're glorifying it. And I think it's very strange. I just think it's very strange.
Quick interjection into the podcast. If you're an online coach who's looking to scale the business, get their first 5K month, 10K month, or even get to 50 to 100K a month, we have helped hundreds of trainers do this at this point, and I've personally generated over $14 million online in the fitness industry. We have a proven methodology that works, provided you're willing to do the work. Now, if you want to book in a free business audit, we'll break down exactly where you are now, where you want to go, and what's currently holding you back. Hit the link below this video and below the podcast to find exactly how we can help you. Pick a time and we will walk you through the process of where your business is at and what exponential growth looks like. Now, back to the podcast. I think it's where we only show one side of the coin. We don't show both. And they're only showing the positive, but they don't show the negative. And the negative won't be unraveled for maybe 20, 30 years' time when we'll start to see a lot of these things coming out. And I think a lot of those things often get swept under the rug that people don't want to see.
I just think it's very strange. I think there's nothing wrong with TRT, like a real therapeutic dose, or like maybe you dabble around with some like, you know, some stupid shit, whatever. I'm sure some of the stuff that I used to take from GNC back in the day that was not really good, I'm sure even some of that has some repercussions to it. But it's very interesting. I don't know. I just think it's very strange. Like I look at bodybuilding, I'm very impressed by it. I think people look insane and look amazing. I always think about there is some sort of ratio where like there is a point where you max out your aesthetics for women, and then it just becomes like you're just
dude fest.
Yeah, you're just
pound time.
You're just impressing dudes.
Yeah.
I forget the exact amount, but there's an actual point where You've stopped impressing women, and now all you're doing is impressing men. And I think about that all the time. Every time I want to do drugs, I'm like, because now I'm 38, and I get my blood tested every year, and there's a part of me that's excited to do TRT at some point in time, and I just haven't been low enough yet. And I am always like, Ryan, if you did this, are you just impressing dudes, or are you impressing women as well? So like that's like something that's in my head all the time.
Okay, so how much do you think men do in life is to impress other men or women?
Dude, I think actually once you get past like 30, it's like all impressing men.
It's status.
Such a good question.
Yeah, it's status game, right?
Yeah.
Because you're looking to accumulate wealth, success, reputation, authority to compete with other men, in my opinion.
100%.
Which is a fucked up weird thing.
It's super sad.
But it's just the way society, I think, is designed. Is that something you saw from your athletic career when you were younger as well?
Man, my athletic career for me, honestly, was the community that I think a lot of people are looking for now when it comes to getting a mentorship, being part of a high ticket fitness program, any of that thing, like any of those kinds of things. I didn't have like the tightest family growing up. It's like very separated from a lot of my family. And for those of you who don't know, who are watching this, like I just met my dad like 2 years ago. So for me, being in sports and just being around other dudes and like having that like tight knit community was something that really like, you know, motivated me in life. Like being around those guys it made me want to be better in my sport, made me want to be better in life, made me want to be better in a lot of things. And to be fair, actually coming out here and being part of the event that you did, I was like, fuck, I missed this a lot. Like to the point where I'm like, dude, I want to like live in Dubai because everybody's here, you know, and like all these trainers are here. Like everywhere I've gone so far, somebody's known me in every gym. They're so excited to see me. Like they want to work out together, this, that. I'm like, oh man, it's so cool.
You mentioned, obviously, you've been a professional athlete. You now have a hugely successful business. Do you think you've changed as a person as you've gained more success in your business?
A little bit. I do feel like, and this is probably similar to you as well, like if I make X amount, I think I'll be pretty happy. And then you get there and you're like, ooh. But I think it really comes down to who's in your circle and who do you look up to and what do you believe to be possible? Because I think a lot of times the only reason that we set a benchmark is because like that's our current reality in that moment. And then once you see another reality that seems achievable is when things start to change a lot. So like having met Alex Hormozi back in the day and, you know, seeing him on his come up and then being friends with him for years and years and years and just listening to him so casually talk about goals of mine that were like, you know, into a different stratosphere and like they were nothing, like swipe under the rug type of thing. It didn't necessarily make me want to reach the success that he has, but it made me feel like the goals that I have were very, very low. And because of that, I don't know if this is the right way of saying it, but I genuinely believe that meeting him actually kind of fucked me. Because I was at a level of happiness with like the numbers and stuff that I was at that I was literally on cloud 9 all the time. And then being around him a lot and then feeling like my numbers were so low, I just was like, damn, you like kind of stole something that I had that was like really special. And I remember eating dinner one time with him and Layla. And they both literally were like, dude, you are one of the happiest, like coolest people we've ever met. And I was like, thanks, I really appreciate that, you know? And they're like, we actually really want to tell you what you should do for your business to make a shit ton more money, but we think that you're going to just be really unhappy. So we're not going to tell you. And I was like, what do you mean? You have to tell me now. And they're like, no, honestly, like if you figure it out on your own, great. But like we were happier when we made less and we don't want to ruin that for you. And it was the first dinner I'd ever had with them. And I actually had my phone on recording and it was sitting here just like it is here. And I actually still have the recording. And it's so funny because that was like 5 years ago. I've never actually listened to the recording again because I'm like, it's going to fuck me up too much to listen to it and be like, damn it.
Don't you think it's interesting how your perception awareness of other people's success then skews your own happiness? That's almost a form of comparison syndrome. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that. Yeah.
Comparison is the thief of joy is such a strong phrase. And I genuinely think that that's like the only reason we get unhappy is because we're comparing ourselves to other people. And to be fair, like most of the time you're comparing yourself to somebody else that you don't even want to be like, which really pisses me off. It's always somebody you don't really want to be like. If you look at somebody and they have a life that's like way cooler than yours and you truly want that and they're more wealthy than you and all the things, I think that's admirable. But most of the time, you're just like, fuck, he has more money than me and his life sucks. I really want that, but you don't.
Well, it's even, we spoke of that a little bit earlier on in terms of, say, like someone like Alex, hugely successful, but I wouldn't want to be him and have all the bullshit that comes with him. Like there's a balancing act, I think, sometimes between happiness and success. And I was saying earlier to like Mike Cameron, like you realize the more success you have, the more these things sometimes cost, because sometimes it like mentally weighs on you, I think, in terms of even the responsibility of things you have to do, team members you have, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I also think like the last couple of years, we've seen some really big shifts in just the value of money, and it's made things a lot more stressful. Like I think your magic number of 10 million was a big number that a lot of entrepreneurs wanted to hit. They're like, man, if I had $10 million, I'd be making, at 10% a year, it's $1 million like passive income. And then we had all this massive inflation, and I feel like 10 million's turned into like 20. And it just sucks because like, houses are twice the price. Like traveling's twice the amount of money. Airbnbs are twice the amount of money. A Lamborghini used to be $300,000. Now they're like, some of them are $700,000-$800,000. It's just gotten so insane, and it's kind of a bummer. But at the same time, the people who can do those things and can step up will always continue to step up. And then the people who just don't believe in themselves, I feel like that's honestly, there's really no such thing as like low income, medium income, and high income. There's just people who believe and people who don't.
How do people go from not believing to believing?
Meeting somebody who actually knows how to do the thing, and then meeting them in person ideally. So like if you guys are listening to this and you've been listening to Charlie for a really long time and you've ever seen like any of his events, it doesn't have to be Charlie, it could be anybody, but like I really do like Charlie. His event was great. You guys should definitely check it out. But there's something that will happen when you meet someone in person versus reading their book versus following their page, any of those things. Like something happens, you meet them and you look at them in the eyes and you're just like, I am just like this person. And it's so hard to unsee that. And it's so hard to go to home and go to bed with that and understand that like you can't do that. That will fuck you up.
I feel like a bit of me died inside, I think, the first time that happened to me, because I was like, I'll give a real example. I think I've spoken about this example before. I remember the first time I spent a bit of time with Wes Watson in Elevation Gym in Miami. I'm like, I'm way smarter than this guy. He's making $3 million a month. I'm like, I was like, I think the whole day I was just perplexed. I'm like, how the fuck it, like, because he literally said to someone at the gym, like, there's no money in software. I'm like, fucking all the billionaires in the world from software. I'm like, but then I thought about it more. I was like, so why is he successful? A, he's very polarizing. It's fair. B, he's a great communicator, like world-class at public speaking, can really get a message across and hit emotions. I was like, cool, maybe that's the skill I need to work on. So I say for anyone, when you have that moment, you meet someone who like, holy shit, he's just a human being, maybe try and look in them what they have that maybe you don't have that you need to work on.
So it's actually what I talked about at your event. So specifically for those of you listening, I talked about unique selling propositions and unique selling mechanisms. And the best way to sell your product is to have something unique and to have just utter belief and conviction in that thing. Wes doesn't have anything unique, but his conviction in his product is insane. I know people who've bought his business programs. I know people who've bought his fitness programs. They're horrible. I'm sorry, Wes, if you're watching this, like, you don't have the best reputation there. However, I will say all these people, even having bought it, have changed their lives and made huge leaps and bounds. So like at the end of the day, that's what matters the most, right? Like a lot of times people buy a fitness program or something like that for the accountability more than the product itself. So I would never say that like what he's selling is bad, but his level of conviction is so aggressive and so gnarly that it just makes anybody just like want to be part of that. It's the same thing like when you're around somebody who just has contagious energy, we're just like, fuck. Even if he makes less than you, you're just like, this person's great. I want him around. He's dope. That's Wes. Even though Wes is in a negative connotation, he's just like, he's talking down to you all the time, but he's making you remember all the things that you actually are capable of, and you're just lower than that. You know what I mean? Like you're just not acting at your highest level of potential, and he reminds you of that. So it's interesting to like somebody so much who shits on you, but like, he's likable.
It's like online Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy. I mean, he's probably the only story that I watch on Instagram.
Well, because it's just, that something will be entertaining.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I will say, though, I don't like the new chain situation he's doing.
Nah, dude, he looks like Cuban drug lord.
It just doesn't work. I think he met the guy, Eric, the other, like the guy who does he does like construction or whatever, yeah. And he had it, and I think he just was like, oh, I really like that a lot, and then he's starting to do it. It just doesn't work.
I agree. You mentioned one thing a minute ago. Who is it you look up to, and who is it you wouldn't use the word idol, but maybe who you use inspiration right now?
I don't really have anyone per se that I'm just like, man, I really, really love their lifestyle. I am fairly good friends with Chris Williamson. I do like how he's able to talk about so many different topics. Like he just did a podcast with Matthew McConaughey. Like,
I was listening to that. Matthew McConaughey's a G.
I'm just like, that's so cool, man. Like, it's so fucking cool. It's unfortunately, like, we don't do the same things. Like, he's not in fitness or anything like that. But I like his lifestyle. He gets to travel. He gets to meet cool and interesting people, and he gets to talk about a lot of topics. I envy that. I think that's really fucking cool. I've never met Mike Thurston, but he kind of does relatively the same thing. Not nearly as, I would say, successful. I don't think in terms of what he's doing, but he has his own podcast. He does travel a lot. He does a lot of really cool shit. I really like that vibe. On the business realm, I've mentioned to you before, there's a guy named Matt Gray. He's kind of super hippie vibes, but he travels a lot and seems to make a lot of money. And I just like that. Like, I just like traveling, meeting people, doing cool shit. Like, without that, I feel dead inside.
What are the most important values to you in life?
Doing cool shit. Having cool people to do cool shit with. And... Like, I think the definition of happiness is really, like, the amount of sharing that you can do with other people. I've said that before. I've never seen that definition anywhere, but it's like you can do all the cool things and have the ability to do all the cool things, but if you can't do them with other people, then it's kind of sad. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a significant other either. You're just doing cool shit with cool people. I think that's really, really important. That's my number one. I wish I could say family is like my number one thing, but I just haven't really had that. Maybe someday maybe that'll be my third thing someday. Maybe I'll have a kid and all of a sudden I'll have this 360. But right now it's kind of like doing cool shit that makes me happy and traveling and meeting new people. Like, I just love meeting people. I'll meet some guy on the street and just be stoked.
Well, that's why I also think the beauty of traveling is it increases your exposure to new things you weren't aware of. And a big framework I think about is like every new place that you go to you've never been before, you almost take a little piece of that away with you in your mind that like alters the reality of who you are and the way you look at the world.
Yeah. I feel like it's really hard for you to be your best self if you've like never left your hometown.
Well, you've got no awareness of anything in the world. You're completely clueless, respectfully.
Yeah, it's terrible. If you live in your hometown right now and you want to be more successful, leave. 100%.
Okay, so I'd even argue that. What would you say to people who, let's say, so I see this a lot in the UK, and I was probably in that category. They are in the UK, they want to be successful, they've got a partner who doesn't want to leave the UK.
Ooh, a partner who doesn't want to leave.
That's common. What would your advice be to that person who's thinking about, like, I wouldn't use the word jumping ship, but maybe having to make a big change because they want to go and chase the life they want and not be average?
Dude, I actually talked about this with my one-on-one clients the other day. I did an entire talk on what it means to be average and what it means to be mediocre. And by definition, you can actually look this up. Like 90% of the population is mediocre. That's fucking wild. That means 90% of people have no goals, no ambition. They're just happy, just coasting. I find that unbelievably fucking sad. It means that 90% of people walking around outside, 9 out of 10 people are dead inside when you look at them. You look straight into their eyes and there's nothing purposeful in there that's like driving them. So sad. If that's you right now and you need to make a change, like just fucking start with yourself. Start with personal development, get your ass in shape, see what happens after that. Secondly, if I'm this person in the UK and I have my significant other and I'm trying to get my life together, I want things to get a lot better, I want to have more purpose in my life, I would probably write shit down on a piece of paper and just be like, what happens if I stay? Like, what are all the pluses if I stay? And then what are all the things that happen if I leave? And then is this person who's in my life right now adding to my life or are they taking away? That's something I ask my mom a lot. I'm like, Mom, how do I know if I found the right chick? She's like, if they're adding to your life, like there's just something about them where like you can't do shit without them, you don't want to do shit without them, that's the one. I've had so many dope girlfriends. I have nothing negative to say about any of them. Like literally every single one, I could cry on the spot right now that I lost them. I mean, I broke up with all of them. But at the same time, it's like they didn't check all those boxes. And there's nothing worse than being 1, 2, 3 years in and just being like, I got to cut it. But you know that's the best decision for yourself. And I think a lot of times right now, I even have people in my VIP program right now, I can hear these women asking me like, what do you do if someone doesn't like support your goals? Like they don't support you eating better. They don't support you making these better decisions. I'm like, is this person a spouse? And sometimes they'll just start crying right on the spot. And I'm just like, dude, that's just not your person. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you listen to, like, the one thing that I really admire about Alex and Layla is Layla has utter belief in Alex and Alex has utter belief in Layla. And I think that's like one of the coolest things. I also don't really agree with the fact that they got together for money, but I do think later on they do complete each other in a way that's very, very rare. And I think it's really, really cool. And I've seen them around each other, and I see how this whole thing connects. And it's a rare thing because, you know, as you get older, you're kind of like, the whole hot thing is like, it's cool, but like, there's got to be some more to it. So, and there's a lot more to it. Unfortunately, I haven't found it, so I can't talk on it. But at the same time, if I was that person, I know exactly what it's like to be there and like wanting more out of life and just being nervous to take that jump. But I can tell you right now, there's nothing I've ever done in my life, and I can say probably the same for you, even not even having asked you. If you've ever put 100% into something, not 97, 98, dip a toe, like if you go 100, has it never not worked out for you? Probably not.
And what I'd say with that is 100 consistently, because like what I see in particular with people with their businesses is that they go 100 for 7 days and then they're out. Whereas like I remember you talking at the event, and I think even on previous podcasts where for like 2-3 years you were doing jury service or public service or whatever it's called in the US, and like basically having to work every hour that God sends to get that paid down. And like for a long period of time, whilst I had my online coaching business, maybe like 150 clients, I was working full time in a proper like job, 50, 60 hours a week. And people now are like, oh, I've got too many clients, like 100, I can't do all this stuff. I'm like, dude, I did fucking everything.
Yeah.
Like, I did everything. So you can't tell me you don't have time.
Yeah.
You can't manage time, you just can't manage yourself. And I think that's where people lack the ability to almost suffer and go through the eat shit phase of the beginning of anything when you suck, till you get to almost like the other end of the spectrum where you look behind the curtain and you get some success and you see how the world really works.
Yeah, man, there's two really big pillars when it comes to becoming successful. It's really just, number one is meeting new people, which is like getting out of your hometown, making investments in mentorship, making investments in yourself, your own personal development. Maybe that's just, you know, buying a fitness program. Maybe it's just buying a fitness app like mine. It's like $30 a month. You know what I mean? Like maybe you just follow something for the accountability. And then the other one is basically just breaking through like your old habits and just like committing to becoming a new person. And it's the same thing with fitness. It's the same thing with everything. You have to create a new identity. You have to start making the decisions that the person who's already achieved the goal that you want is making. Until you've decided that you are going to be that person and you start making those decisions, like if you're somebody who wants to get fit right now, the first way that you can do what I'm talking about is you can go to the grocery store and you can look in your cart and say, hey, would someone fit buy the shit that's in my cart right now or no? And if there's a fucking cookie in there, take the cookie out of the fucking cart, right? Because that's not the person who's ripped with abs. That's not what they're getting. Right? Like if you're the person who wants to increase your fitness business and you're hanging out at the bar at night and getting a couple drinks in and just like hanging out with the boys, like, no, like you need to put some work in for a while. And it's just the way it is. And I think that if you're not willing to do that, then that's cool. There's a lot of other people who are. Leave some space for them.
And I think that's also where people don't understand it's a player versus player game. Like every industry is competitive, and if you're not willing to be in better shape and stick to your diet and stand out than someone else is, and if they learn how to market and sell better than you, they're going to beat you all day long. And that's one of the things you said earlier when we went e-foiling. I was like, I think my partner Charlie, I was like, oh, do you like desserts? Do you like sweet stuff? He's like, yeah, I do, but I feel like shit after I've eaten them, and also I feel like a pussy when I've like basically cheated myself.
Mm-hmm. I love that shit, dude. Like honestly, like my goal all the time is to have so much discipline that makes other people uncomfortable. I want you to be uncomfortable. If you're uncomfortable, then I know I'm doing something right. And I tell people that in my group all the time for my VIP program. I'm always like, dude, like you should be making uncommon decisions all the time to get uncommon results. At dinner, in life, always. I want someone to always ask you why you're making that decision, because that means that it's such a strong decision that other people are questioning their own decisions. And your discipline is always like a mirror of someone else's insecurities. They're insecure about what they're looking at right now. So like all of your discipline is just mirroring exactly what they want. So as soon as they comment, you already know that you're winning. And I just love that.
Would you say this is one of the reasons you've been highly successful in your business is the skill of discipline?
I'm highly successful in my business because I just want purpose, and I didn't have it in my family life, I guess. So like I genuinely believe that my community is my family. Like for me, I think that's where my secret to success is. I've just always been like, I've taken pictures like the first time I met my dad and I posted it in my Facebook group for my people. Like I've talked about shit. I've cried about shit. Like my brother just passed away like a month or two ago. I talked about that with everybody. I had a whole talk on that was like life-changing for my one-on-one clients. And, you just got to put yourself out there, because like, what's really going to make you different than everybody else? It's your story. Like, what makes you relatable to everybody else? Like, nobody gives a fuck about, at the end of the day, it's crazy that no one gives a fuck about your workouts or your nutrition or any of that. They care about your mindset. Like, how do you think about things in every scenario so that you can change the way people are thinking about those things right now? Like, your mindset tips, your lifestyle, like even when you're saying like, who do you look up to? There's a reason I care about the people that I said, and you probably have different people, and everyone else is like that too. So it's the same thing for anyone right now who's like reluctant to kind of like try to go into the fitness industry and become a coach, because you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm the right person for that, or I don't know if anyone's going to want to follow me. It's like, there's a ton of people who want to follow you, and you won't even know until you try. And all of a sudden you're going to have these fans, and I think it's crazy. And I also think that if you guys want more out of life, you have to understand that most people, those 90% who are mediocre and who are average, if you were to actually reframe that and think, I'm a follower and not a leader, what does that make you feel like? You should always want to lead. You should always be the person at the head of the pack. And even if you feel like you don't have the energy or the ability to be able to be that leader, develop the traits to be the leader. Because when you're not, you have to accept the fact that you're a follower, and fuck that.
It's quite a cold analogy to give, but I like to think of the world as
cold.
Bro, I'm cold as fuck. Calculated. Is wolves and sheep. That's the way I look at the world.
Yeah.
It's like 95% of the world are sheep, and the 5% of the wolves. And like, if you look at the wealthy people in the world versus the non-wealthy, that's really the way it works. And I think you have to identify what side of the fence you want to sit on and where you want to be in the pecking order. And I think that's also your ability, as you said, to lead, but also to help people. And then also probably thirdly, to be decisive and do the things that other people aren't willing to do. Because you've done a lot of very fucking hard shit, and I've done a lot of very hard shit, and that's ultimately what gives you more status and gets you to where you want to be and gets you to success. Also gives you some good stories to talk about. And I think that's what gives you the resilience also to get to a higher level.
Dude, I love all the hard stuff. I like the hard mindset stuff too. Like I always thought mindset was just rubbish until like I started doing one-on-one coaching, and I saw a lot of people offering training, nutrition, and mindset. And I was like, what the fuck is mindset? Like, what is that? Like, what are you going to tell me? You know what I mean? Like, that's going to change my life. And I started seeing people just struggling with certain things that were just like, I was like, that's really how you think about this problem? Why are you even questioning it? Like this girl the other day, this is going to be strong for people. I literally was like, do you guys have any questions right now that are like about this topic I was talking about in terms of, plateaus and stuff like that? And this girl was like, I have this problem with self-sabotage. And she's like, every time I get halfway to my goal, I just go backwards. And I can't figure it out. Like for some reason, I just like don't want to hit my goal. I'm like, cool. So you're telling me right now that there's a piece of food on the shelf right now that's not alive. It's just a piece of food on the shelf. And the whole reason it's here is because some guy genetically modified that food so that you can eat that unlimited, so he can make unlimited amounts of money off of you. He wants you to become super, super crazy fat. And you are giving the power to this person for you to go and spend unlimited amounts of money on this food that is going to make you fat. So you're going to give all of the power to this piece of food on a shelf that is sitting there. It doesn't have the ability to talk to you or anything, but it makes another person rich. That is what's making you fat. And you're accepting that right now. And her fucking face almost melted off. And I was like, wow, that's mindset. And once I started figuring that out, I started creating talks for all of my people where I was like, all right, well, how can I literally just make every topic so polarizing and so like insanely like memory burning that they would just be like, fuck, I don't ever want to come to one of these talks and not be closer to my goal.
What would be your business comparison of something similar to that? For example, I would say one of the things I see a lot of trainers struggle with is overwhelm, which in my opinion is from a lack of actually just taking action and getting started.
Yeah, you're overwhelmed because you're trying to do everything at once. I do that a lot too. I think it's actually that's probably my biggest problem that I have is I'm always like, man, I gotta do all these things, but it's like, you just gotta do fucking one of them. It's the same thing with nutrition too, like in training and like all the things that becomes, important when it comes to getting fit is like, you get so overwhelmed by all the things, but you gotta just take one thing at a time. I think for the business side of things, the most important thing is having a mission and values, I think. And I think it actually helps with life as well. I try to tell people in my one-on-one coaching program, I'm like, you need to make a mission and values for your life. Just like a company would for their company. So we do them personally. And then I think that also as a business, even for you, like as a personal business, you should have your own mission and values. You know, 7-figure scaling should have its own mission and values, all of that, because accountability is the biggest thing. And what's the thing that's going to keep you accountable when nobody's around? Those like non-negotiables, those mission statements, those values, those different things, right? Like for me, like I will do something an hour a day, every day for fitness. It could be walking, you know, like I saw you the other day, like hella early in the morning, you were like walking around the Dubai Marina, and I was like, dude, fuck yeah. Like I loved that. I was like, yeah, I like that. And then like, I just like seeing people try, you know what I mean? But you have to understand what those things are. Like maybe you don't know what they are. Like, and that comes down to acting like the person that you want to be. What are all of the things that they do each and every day? What would they do each and every day? And you need to make those things non-negotiable. On my background on my phone right now, you can look at it right now, I write notes to myself and it says, don't forget what you did to get here. And I think about all those hours of community service. I think about all the things. And it's like, if I like just like won't do a simple task that I need to get done for the day, I just fucking look at this and I'm like, dude, do you know what you did to get here? Are you fucking kidding me? And everything seems easy. Have I ever showed you that before?
Yeah.
I do this all the time. And like, this might change. Like if I have something super important for like a week or two, guys, this is a huge, huge hack. Like if the most important thing to you is losing 50 pounds for your wife so you can look, or your future wife, so you can look amazing at the wedding, or maybe you have a kid and you want to never be the fat dad, or you want to be the rich dad, you don't want to be the broke dad, or like whatever it is, if there's something that is really driving you, write that shit down. What do you look at more than anything in this world? Your fucking phone, all the time. Just make it a remembrance, like all the time.
I think subliminal messaging with things like that are very, very powerful.
Yeah.
That's why, like, obviously I spoke at the event about this, but even like my computer screen, I have like my goals written on there. I have fucking vision board on my phone, vision board on my computer wallpaper. Like everywhere is like subliminal messaging of what you're doing, why, what you're doing, why. Just like constantly like hitting it into your head. And I think people shy away too much from being very almost outspoken with the goals of what they want to achieve. I'm a big believer in terms of like law of attraction. Once you put something out into the world, it becomes a real thing, and then you actually can then go through and fucking do it. Yeah,
that's crazy, man. If you can show the world how passionate you are about the thing that you love to do, you will be very surprised at what happens to you. It's just insane. Like, you just have to understand what you want to do. That's the hardest thing too. Like even right now for you, I'm sure you have so many different opportunities. Should you keep doing the same thing, or should you take on a new opportunity? It's hard.
That's, I think, is an interesting thing to talk about. As the game, as you get more success, is how the fuck do you not get more distracted? Because at the beginning, you don't really have many options. The more money, the more success you have, the bigger the network you have. It's constantly more options. I even give you a good example. Like even after, this happens every time, I'm just like degenerates. After the event this weekend, I end up like 4 or 5 people just randomly voicing at me, pitching shit. I'm like, dude, like, yeah, like, just. I'm never going to work or do anything with anyone who just randomly fucking pretends to be a voice note pitching me something. But I think that's, the most important thing is sometimes being tunnel focused on what you want to do and why. And I think there's a stages of life where maybe you should say yes to everything. But when it comes to business opportunities and getting more success, I think it's actually a game of subtraction rather than addition.
Yeah, I agree. Being able to say no to something is incredibly powerful. Like I know that, who's the Berkshire Hathaway guy?
Warren Buffett.
Yeah, Warren Buffett. He's always like, the reason I've been able to be so successful over my predecessors is basically the fact that I've been able to say no. And I'll add one more piece to that, is that every time that you say no, you're leaving space for a yes that belongs in your life. You know what I mean? I've never heard anyone say that, but I always think for every no that you give, you're just leaving space for that yes. And I think that's a really strong thing to think about.
And I would give some advice on how I think about that. Is if it's not a fuck yes, it's a no. So if I'm not like,
there we go.
If I'm not like excited, like, yeah, I definitely want to do that.
Yep.
If I have to think, it's a no.
It's a no.
Like, you know in your gut, like straight away, if this is a good idea or not.
I remember Alex telling me that he used to get excited to tell people no to see how they would react. Like they'd be like, hey man, can you help me like move or whatever? He'd be like, no. And they'd be like, why? And like, are you busy that day? And he'd be like, no, I just don't want to. And I remember him saying that, and I was like, I didn't even know that was an option. So I started doing that. And people would just be like, hey, can you help me with this thing or whatever? And I'm just like, hey man, like respectfully, like, no. I'm like, even like my friend Sonny, he lives here now, Sonny Webster. He's like, hey, can you pick me up at the LA airport? I was like, no. Like one of my better friends. And I'm like, I'll pay for the Uber, but like, I'm not going to go drive there. You know what I mean? Like like it just doesn't make any sense.
So I'm exactly the same, and even like my girlfriend takes a piss at me sometimes for it, because I'm like, we actually spoke about this a bit earlier on. Okay, this is actually a true story. So we were going e-foiling, going out on this boat thing, and the dude forgot the life jackets. Then we had to turn around. We wasted like 20 minutes. Ryan goes to me, he's like, you should like bill him for your time. But that's actually like how my brain works. I start to calculate how much money I make an hour, and I'm like, fuck, that 20 minutes is just cost me like X amount.
Yeah.
But that's actually how you need to think with your time.
You have to.
Because the most like important thing you have isn't money, it's time. Because they print money, they don't print time. And you going to the airport to pick Sonny up, for example, is a fucking waste of your skill set. Whereas you actually working in your business gives you the ability to change other people's lives and really have an impact and not be a taxi driver.
Yeah, and to be fair, there's moments where like picking someone up at the airport is a good idea. You know what I mean? Like you haven't seen someone in 6 months or a year or something, and you want to go pick them up and you want to have that moment. Like that's part of building memories. Totally cool. But when it's just like, hey, can you pick me up at the airport? It's like, no.
What would your advice be to people? Like obviously you've hanged around with Alex a lot in terms of maybe being slightly ruthless with protecting your time.
It's interesting to see what he wants to put his time into and kind of like what's important to him. It's definitely not the same thing that would be important to me or somebody else or something like that. But like, he just knows exactly what he wants. I think like that's the thing that a lot of people just don't have. You know what I mean? Like even like most of us, like, you know, we talked about 90% of the population being mediocre or whatever. It's like the difference between being in the 90% and then being like in the 99% is just picking something and being pretty consistent with it. The difference between being in that top 1% is knowing exactly what you want to do forever and just being just diabolically fucking on point all the time. And he's that person. And for him, honestly, it doesn't even matter what it is. It's just like, I just want to make as much money as humanly possible. That's his goal. So he will kind of switch to whatever the opportunity vehicle is, even though he says you should always stay with the same thing, so on and so forth. But ultimately, at the end of the day, for him, the goal is money. I don't think I'm the money guy. I think I'm like I loved going e-foiling today. I would gladly take 30 grand less or whatever would happen for the day or whatever for that. But yeah, I think it's really just comes down to understanding exactly what you want. And then once you understand what that is, then you can start making these decisions that just line everything up. This is why it's so important to like sit down right now, make your mission, make your values, make your non-negotiables for your business, for your life, for your family, personally, like just like fucking lay it all out because it will change everything for you.
It's interesting you say that because Reese, you're doing a podcast with after this, he asked me, what do I do during like deep work time? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, I've got a flight back to England. Like, what should I do? I was like, the best thing you can do on flights, for me, I like just like sitting there. I look out the window over the world and just think like, what do I want? Why? With who? Where am I going? What am I doing that's right? What am I doing that's wrong? And just almost like brainstorm and like write stuff out in terms of maybe where I need to course correct, where I need to improve, and having absolute clarity of where I'm going.
Hard to do.
Which is why I think being on a plane and not connecting to the internet is one of the things that actually put you literally in like a little bubble where you can focus on that. You mentioned obviously Alex then, and he's obviously had a big impact on your career. What would you say is the biggest thing you've learned from Alex?
He used to always say this thing kind of like nobody cares. And it was always like, I'm like, oh man, should I do this way? Should I do this way? Should I do this way? Nobody cares. Just fucking do the thing. And I could just hear him like saying it all the time. Like all these things that you care about, like nobody cares about. They just want the thing, or you just need to do the thing, or like whatever. And I think he's very quick to just like make the offer, you know, move, do this, do that. Like no one's worried about the shirt you were wearing. No one's worried about, you know, the way you looked or, you know, anything. It's just like, you just got to do the thing. And I try to tell that to pretty much everybody who's like trying to make all their shit perfect. And I think one of the bigger successes that I had in my business as well was some of the things that I launched were some of the things that I thought were never ready. And I thought they were terrible. And I was like, fuck, like I want this to be so much better. And I would launch it and it would do insane. And then I would fix it, make it way better. And then it would do terrible. And then I just remember now, I'm like, nobody cares. They just want like the meat and potatoes out of everything. And I'm very surprised that's the way things are. And I think at the end of the day, that's because people are looking for a connection. People are looking for like you personally. And Alex didn't actually believe in personal brand. Like when I first met him, I actually have a video of him on my phone, and he was asking me, how many YouTube followers do you have? At the time I was like, oh, I only have like 20,000 or something like that. And he's like, oh, that's really good. He's like, I don't ever want to be famous. I only want to be rich. And his video person, what's this guy's? Caleb, yeah. Caleb was like, dude, can you give me that clip? And I actually gave it to him like in Vegas like a couple months ago. And yeah, he found out that he needed more fame to make more money, so he did it. You know what I mean? So like that's, you know, just having those missions and values and what you want and making everything clear, because he never wanted to be on camera, ever.
And I think that just comes down to being clear of what you want, and then
yes,
what actually is the big needle mover to get there, which is what a lot of people don't spend time thinking about.
Yeah. And he's willing to sacrifice, dude. Like, he really spends time in a closet working and doesn't care about sunlight or any of those things. Like, he actually puts earplugs in and then puts his headphones on top of it. And then there's like all the shades are closed, just dark, and just like he loves it, you know?
So we are coming towards the end of 2024. We've got a new year, 2025 next year. A lot of people are going to have very ambitious goals when it comes to maybe fitness, business, just their life in general. What would be your best advice to anyone to really make 2025 their year?
I think the first thing you need to do is be clear on what you want and start to write down what are the actions that person is taking. Like we've talked about a few times on the podcast. It's just like, what are the actions? Like if you want to get fit, what are they getting from the grocery store? Pull out your phone and look at how many steps you have right now. Like how many steps are you getting per day? How many steps does the person who's fitter than you get per day? Probably double, triple, you know? Are they drinking alcohol? If you want to be more valuable and you want to have a more successful business and stuff like that, like what is that person doing? Like what does Charlie do every single day that you want to emulate? You know, what does Alex do every single day that you want to emulate? You don't have to take all the things, but you can take some of them. And I think, you know, laying all those things out is going to be a really, really good canvas for you. And then I also need you to understand that, like, nobody cares. Like, if you are embarrassed on camera, nobody gives a fuck. Like, everyone already forgot that you were on camera. I still get embarrassed sometimes being in, like, public places doing things. And it's crazy because as soon as I'm done, I'm just like, I'm never going to see those people again. It doesn't even fucking matter. Like sometimes I'll walk through the airport and I'm trying to do a selfie and I'm like fucking, you know,
underhand.
Yeah, and I'm like, why am I nervous around who? Like why? You know what I mean? And it happens. There's nothing you can do about it. But you just have to just believe in yourself so much that like you just want the thing so much. Like I just want you to like. Actually, you know what? I don't give a fuck what your goal is right now. This is actually one of the best tips Alex ever gave me. This is it right here. If you were to coach yourself, stand in front of yourself and look at yourself, what would you tell yourself to do? That's a really big thing he always told me. Whenever you just don't know what to do, literally clone yourself, stare at yourself, become your own coach, and tell yourself, what would you do to fix the problem? And most of the time, it's the inverted thinking of like, what would I do to not get closer to my goal? What would I do to absolutely destroy me getting to my goal? If I want to get fitter, would I drink alcohol? Would I start going to McDonald's every day? It starts to make the actual real choices so much more clear. Same thing with your business. Would I just only work on my shit 2 hours a day? Would I make shitty offers? Would I be like, yo, buy my like $30 thing when you can buy my $3,000 thing? You know what I mean? Would I never run ads? That doesn't make sense. I don't like money. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what would you do to destroy your business? What would you do to destroy your body? What would you do to destroy your family? Do the opposite.
I think that's a really good note to finish on. One of the big things I personally do with that is I have a set list about, I think it's like 10, 12 questions I ask myself, as in like specific coaching questions where I almost have to ask coach client relationship, and I ask myself as if I'm like an alter ego. And that's a really useful exercise. It's helped me break down some of the jigsaw puzzles of business where you get a bit in your own head and you have a lot more clarity.
Strong.
That's a good note to finish on. Big thank you for your time today, Ryan.
Thanks,
where's the best place for people to find out about you?
You guys can find me on Instagram, Ryan Fisch, RyanFisch, or you can catch me on chalkperformancetraining.com.
Awesome. Took value from the podcast. Make sure you give Ryan a follow. Make sure you smash the like button. Comment below any questions, and we'll see you next episode very soon.